Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon. I'm your host, joined by my blue collar badass, Matt. How are projects going in Michigan?
Projects are going pretty good. You know, it's still chilly. We still have a lot of frost. I'm not going to bitch about the weather today, but I am going to tell you about an interesting story, an interesting phone call I actually just had about 15 minutes before we logged on here. My superintendent calls me and he goes, "Hey, Matt, you know that Project X, we got the electricity disconnected from that old building, didn't we?" And I said, "Oh shit." So I go digging through my files and I was right. Yes, we did. The local utility company, you know, they provide a disconnect letter before you demo. So I'm reading it and they removed the meter. They discontinued service, blah, blah, blah. Here's the weird thing. The house has been gone now for a few weeks. We tore it out. My earth worker this afternoon with his excavator found a buried electrical line that's not supposed to be there and sure as hell not supposed to be live. And it was very, very live. He wrapped it around his bucket. Luckily, everybody was fine. Nobody got hurt, but it just goes to show you that even as much as we preach about communication and you know, doing all your due diligence on the show here, you can do everything possible and you still got to get these surprises. You still got to pay attention. And I don't know. I was kind of blown away by the call, frankly, but obviously glad nobody was hurt.
One, yes, like that's awesome that nobody got hurt, right? Two, that's what you get for stealing electricity.
That's what we're thinking. Yeah.
that's
Somebody wasn't paying for it.
Or three, you know, no as-built and, you know, somebody forgot about something somewhere, but for it to still be live, you know, that's, oh man. Are the neighbors pissed?
I haven't heard anything from them yet. We'll see. It's a residential house. We tear that down and then we're putting in a commercial facility. So, you know, who knows who was stealing cable and electricity for how long. The house has been there for probably 50 years. But anyways, it was an interesting end of the day.
Well, at least nobody got hurt.
Right on, man.
So with that shocking story, we are going to introduce our guest today, Shane Harrell. Shane has, man, I think there's probably not much you haven't done in construction, but has been in the commercial construction world as a GC, construction management, on projects from, you know, a couple grand, which I don't know, you know, even how you papered those, but from 100 grand or a couple grand to, you know, 140 million spanning coast to coast. Today he's based in Texas doing residential custom homes. Craftsman Homes is his company, and they're doing new custom builds, remodels, homes for sale. And Shane, what I found interesting, you know, besides, you know, being surrounded by girls and close to teenagers, is your love of Texas music. So first, Shane, welcome to the show. And then my next question is, what is Texas music?
Well, thanks for having me, Matt and Dillon. And Texas music, well, you know, everything's bigger in Texas, right? I'll hear that. You know, we still ride our horses to work and all that. Now, the Texas music around the country is probably known more as a red dirt country. We kind of liken it back to the Willie Nelsons, Waylon Jennings back in the day, and then it's just kind of morphed over time. And you know, nowadays we have guys that are showing up on the Nashville scene, but really got their start here in Texas. And a lot of their music was based on things around Texas. You know, they sing about, you know, the bars and honky tonks. They, you know, sang about being down on the rivers and, you know, drinking beer and, you know, playing in these old, you know, broke down bars. And again, as they've kind of grown through the years, they've gone on to bigger things, but it all got to start here. And you know, we're always proud of being from Texas and the music coming out of it. So
ZZ Top were Texas boys, weren't they?
They were, but they're a little more on the rock side. You've got some guys that were more on the rock side of the world, but that came out of Texas, and nowadays it's more kind of like I said, it's about the culture. It's about a lifestyle, say, and is a lot of what the guys that we follow now are really more about.
Got it.
It just reminds me, like, if you watch Yellowstone, there's when Jimmy's down on the ranch in Texas, there was three gods. It was God Almighty, George Strait, and the cowboy that Jimmy was talking to. But it's one of those things, George Strait's still
Still the king,
still revered, especially in
Yeah.
Texas.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because we just had the Super Bowl, and they of course, there's been all kinds of memes about the Super Bowl, but one of the big ones coming out of Texas is, when you want a real Super Bowl show, call George. He'll so
Like it. Well, Shane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, where you came from and how you got there?
Well, so I'm a third generation construction worker. My father and grandfather both were in the electrical trade. My father owned his own electrical business, which is where I got my start. Started out as a laborer and apprentice for him. Worked on and off, through school, into college. Had the opportunity to work with my grandfather while I was in college. He came and spent some time working with my dad again. And as I got further into college, my dad decided that he was going to kind of wind things down, and was tired of dealing with the personnel side of the business. So he slowed things down, and they actually went on the road for a while. And so it really got to the point to where I didn't have much in the way of work with them. And so I moved over to working with one of the GCs we'd done some work for, and enjoyed it. I'd always been interested in kind of the big picture of the projects, and my degree is in construction, my undergraduate degree. And so it was kind of a good fit there, since I, had taken a liking to the overall process, and worked for him. And then when it was time to do my internship, one of our customers, which was a pre-engineered building manufacturer, used to be one of the preeminent Butler manufacturing,
Yep.
Had an office in San Marcos where I grew up, and we had done work for them. And so I interned with them as an estimator, and they set me up with one of their builders coming out of my internship to go to work for them, and came out as project manager right after I graduated, and I went to work for that builder. He was a local guy, did engineered buildings, and still around today. They're a smaller GC, and from there I went to what's now a regional GC, big school builder at the time in the area. Went to work for them, and then moved on to from there to the airport project. It was the large $140 million job, and did worked over there. Ended up that was in San Antonio. Ended up going up to DFW Airport to do some transportation and airport related work up at DFW Airport, and then from there came back down to San Antonio and went to work for the national firm, which is where I kind of got the coast to coast going as a project executive, kind of more on the operations management side. And we did everything from multifamily. We did industrial, big tilt wall industrial distribution projects. We did federal work, and we did office, retail, restaurant. Kind of did a little bit of everything. And then in 2017, I purchased Craftmaster Homes, which is our residential division, and it's a company that had been in business for 25 years at that point. So this year we're going on our 30th year of being in business, and the gentleman that I purchased the business from was retiring, took it over, and started kind of making it my own company. A little different flair from somebody that was retiring to, somebody that had come from a faster paced commercial background. And then shortly after I started running things, I had a former subcontractor call me for a project with a oil and gas outfit. So I received a phone call on I believe it was a Wednesday, and they told me that they needed some help, and we had a meeting on Friday morning. So Eric was born on Friday night, and on Wednesday night, and ordered business cards and had them hot shipped to me, and had cards to go to a meeting on Friday morning, and kind of started our commercial division. So and we've done various commercial projects. Like I said, the oil and gas side, we've done some restaurant, retail. Been looking at several assisted living projects here as of late, and also looking at some retail and possibly some medical related projects coming up as well.
There's a lot there to unpack, and I want to get to all of it because you've got an interesting story there. Let's go all the way back to your time with Butler. That one rings familiar with me. We are a Varco Pruden builder now, who is now that Butler and VP are both owned by Blue Scope.
Right.
So what did you do as an intern for a fabricator, for a manufacturer?
Well, so I worked in the sales department, and I was in estimating. So whenever big, custom buildings would come in, I would work the estimates. I worked directly under the regional sales engineer. And so typically, I would put together the bids. If we had to outsource materials, a lot of times when you get on federal work, they'll spec Butler as your building, but they won't use any components from Butler aside from the frame.
Yeah.
You go buy everything else, outsourced in OEM. So I would be trying to find people who would sell one to us, since we were Butler and we competed against. It was like I call Varco and say, "Hey, can I buy your panels?" And they're going to tell me what I can do with those.
Right.
And we used to compete a lot. Varco and Butler back in the day were two of the heaviest hitters.
Yeah.
In the country, and so we competed a lot against Varco, and it was we would, of course, at that point this was 94. So, it wasn't like I had great software to work with and that. It was, you did have some internet, but, a lot of it was still going and trying to find those vendors around the country and yellow pages. And, yeah, that was kind of what I did. I put the estimates together, gave them to either the sales engineer or the main area sales manager for that particular plant, and then I would work with our engineers in-house as well, in terms of what it would take for us to provide the building itself. Sometimes it was kind of kicking them along to help us get more competitive on it, because as you probably know, in dealing with the pre-engineered side, if you get something that's not perfectly 90 degrees square, they start spinning.
Yeah, very much so. And it's weird now because now that they're both owned by the same parent company, but they still fight back and forth like siblings, and they still compete. And frankly, it's a tough gig right now. We were kind of talking before we went live about supply chain issues, which obviously everyone's heard about. Well, the whole allure of the pre-engineered or metal building system, as they call it now, was that you could get it really fast, right? It was a little bit cheaper, but really you save so much time.
Right.
Pre-engineered building kits now are like 54 weeks lead time. So there is no savings anymore. So those guys are really fighting, it seems, to keep their competitive advantage in the marketplace, because it was kind of stripped away from them throughout what's going on now. Right.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's funny you say that, because I was pricing out this 6 9,000 square foot buildings for one of my subcontractors is looking at doing his new office and then, having some lease space with him, and called my primary supplier, who is not a national, they're a local vendor. And he goes, I can't do that much right now, Shane. He goes, I can't even get the stuff I've already committed that it's been bid that I've been waiting on, answers to, because I just can't do it. And so now it's like, okay, now what am I going to do? Because now I'm going, I don't have those commitments, like at least having the relationship with Marco, now I'm going out on the street to try and find somebody else to provide that. So yeah, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, it's a tough market without a doubt.
So.
Shifting gears a little bit, I really want to cover this briefly. So the K-12 market in Texas in particular. So Texas has a lot of independent school districts. I know some of this because we used to do a lot of work in Texas, or we've built a few high schools and like other K-12 like private schools within. We did one in Houston and a few others. But some of the, like, you see these schools being built in Texas. I'm just curious on your experience with those schools, because you'll see 500,000 square foot high schools, purely high schools, be put up in Texas, which is just like, even for like most like the Midwest is like insane. I mean, for these buildings, but kind of your experience for like some of these projects, you're putting up like $1 billion, or some of the bonds that get passed are like $1 billion bonds for school districts in Texas. Because again, if you're putting up a 500,000 square foot building, you're looking at least, $120+ million to do it with fields and everything.
Yeah.
So if you want to elaborate on Texas school districts.
Well, so school building is still like super, super large in terms of the commercial market. And it's just a constant. I mean, they're the guys that I used to work for. I mean, they still are huge across the state of Texas in the school market. Very, very successful in it. But it is a tight market. I mean, yes, the dollars are large, and the square footage is large, but you also have the population. I mean, we talked briefly, about my girls getting close to teenage years, or my oldest one getting close to a teenager. So the elementary school that they go to, my daughter is in 5th grade. So it opened when she was in 1st grade, and it was designed for 800 kids when it opened. They have already added on 8 classrooms, and they did that last year, and they anticipate it to be at full capacity by next year. And they will be adding another elementary school in this development that they put it into here in the coming few years. The growth that we have is huge. So, you look at that. So that's that elementary school. Well, what does that mean? That means that although that many kids are going to be going to middle school, that means that many kids are going to be going to high school. The last high school that I worked on was between Austin and San Antonio. And at the time, it was designed for right around 1,200 kids. And I'm not positive, but I believe they probably have about 3,000 kids there now at that high school. And it's crazy. I mean, and that would have been 2004, 2000, probably opened in 06. It's probably, I think, the fall of 06, if I remember right, or fall of 05, I guess. Fall of 05 is when we opened. So just that, and when we were building that school, I believe there was 2 subdivisions on the farm to market road that we built it on. Now there's probably 30, and within a 5-mile stretch. I mean, but that's the kind of population growth, and kind of, but to your point, that's why we have schools that are 500,000 square feet. They're like malls. I mean, they really are. you know, the expanse that they stretch it's like a mall. I mean, I'm trying to remember, I think that high school was about 300,000 feet when we built it. But again, we put in the infrastructure, not so much classroom space, but like because you have all your gyms, you have a major theater, you know, a cafeteria space, you know, and then you just add on for the additional classrooms as it grows. Of course, you know, we talked about the Texas music. You know, one of the other things down here in Texas that's pretty big is football. You know, so some of these other bond packages, you start looking at these stadiums, and
it's like a $25 million stadium package, you know, because everything it's built in place. Stands, you know, it ain't metal bleachers.
Place concrete, yeah.
Like it ain't metal bleachers that, you know, I had for my games and stuff. Like it's, you know, real, and you have like a real visitors section, like it's a bowl for these high schools, you know, like, you know, some of the podunk colleges, you know, I knew in Indiana, like Texas high schools had better stadiums than like, you know, a college in Indiana. Like it's just, it's crazy. Like, you know, for some of the infrastructure that gets built.
Yeah, for sure. So.
Yeah, we certainly don't have anything of that scale here in Michigan for K-12. Not that I've seen anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we're talking about really big, huge commercial buildings that you've worked on. I got to ask, what led you to kind of jump ship, take a right turn and go into residential?
Well, it's kind of a twofold scenario. One, I always wanted my own gig. You know, I like the man, but I was tired of working for him.
We get it.
You're in the right place.
The other is really the client interface. You know, when I was doing the bigger work, I used to kid about it, but it was very serious. Am I going to build a project? Meaning, am I going to sit here and just touch paper all day, or am I going to project build it? Meaning, we're going to go out and actually get a project done, and we're going to be proud of what we do at the end of the day. And the larger the project, the less builder mentality I would see in it. And, you know, again, coming from that background with my father and grandfather, there was pride in the blue collar work. And it, you know, when I was doing that $140 million job, it was tough. I mean, I was a senior project manager. I answered to a project executive and a vice president. And, you know, there were weeks I would spend 40 hours in meetings. That's what it was. It was just red tape. And then we would get to a point and I would, you know, then I would have to turn around and go out in the field and spend, you know, 2 or 3 straight days in the field trying to remedy or come up with a game plan as to how we would, you know, move forward with something that we've been battling over. And it just, to me, it lost the luster of being a builder. And that's what I wanted to get back to, and really working with the customer to kind of build that relationship. And so that's really what kind of led me down that path. It was those two items, and it was just, okay, how am I going to do this? And you know, this particular endeavor opened up and allowed me that opportunity.
I get it. I mean, I went in the opposite direction. I started in residential, went to commercial, but what you just described is the exact reason why I'm a shitty project manager, because I can't handle all of the monotony and the paperwork and the forms upon forms. And, you know, I on the sales side, the pre-con side, I do my fair share of, you know, estimates and paperwork and stuff, but I get that face-to-face interaction with all of our clients. So I completely can see where you're coming from. It's a drastic change, you know, in work product, but, you know, it allows you the autonomy and the face-to-face. So that makes a lot of sense. It's an interesting answer, and one that I haven't heard previously when we've been doing these shows.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing is, as you look at the commercial versus the residential, typically on the residential side, you see your money a little faster.
Just not as much of it.
It's not as much, but you see it. You know,
yeah.
That's that, you know, when I was talking about the oil and gas industry, that was one of the backbreakers is you're generally 120 days before you see that first check. And, I can't live like that very long.
Not many people can, man. That's brutal. Yeah, we've talked before, the differences, and we'll get new subs once in a while that'll come in, smaller scale guys, and they want a deposit. And we look at them like they're speaking a foreign language.
Right.
You don't get a deposit in commercial world, but you flip the fence into residential, and sure, you could get, all your materials paid for before the job starts. And that's commonplace.
Right.
So with that that commercial mentality, though, I got to imagine you brought some of that mentality and that pace, because commercial typically runs faster, I think, than residential.
For sure.
Did you bring some of that into the residential side of what you're doing now?
Yes and no. I mean, you can try and, put that square peg in the round hole, but it doesn't always work. So there's things that I've tried to do that, and to your point, how can I utilize some of those practices and those processes from the commercial world? And, trying to do that, I mean, trying to, like, from a scheduling perspective, one, most of these subcontractors, and that's, I think, to some point of somewhat with the pay that you were just mentioning, wanting to deposit or that, they can't see, to the tip of their nose sometimes with regard to schedule, monies, any of that kind of stuff. So you're having to kind of force it. And so that's one thing that I feel like I've been able to try to do with most of these subs is communicate it better, because I have a plan, take that, that schedule that we've built, or that's commonplace in the commercial world, and really bring it back into the residential where you're communicating with the subs. Now, kind of to our earlier discussion of supply chain, it gets a little more difficult when those things impact the project, and then things start slipping, and what I've planned for no longer works, because sub A is 2 weeks late because of the material. Then sub B he's like, look, dude, you lost your slot. I'm a month out. So those kind of things have been more challenging, because those guys typically don't have the resources like you would in a commercial environment, where you might get, they have 20 guys, and, a lot of these may be, the owner and 2 guys, so it's a single crew that you're getting out of an entire company. I've tried to utilize that. One area where I feel like I failed, just from the kind of the background is like on the safety side, trying to get these guys to understand that is right over. It's a constant battle to try and really just get them to understand any of those elements. Not at the level at which we would have done at the commercial level, but just the general side of it.
I was actually having a conversation with my son. My oldest he'll be 15 next month, and I drive him to school in the mornings, and he was talking about steel-toed boots for some reason the other day. And I started laughing. I said, my first pair of steel-toed boots, I bought them when I was building houses because I felt like I should. Like, I put them on once and they hurt my damn feet so bad, I never wore them again. And, to talk about safety, like, we didn't do anything. I mean, I'd wear boots, but that was the extent of my PPE, right? There was never a hard hat. There was never a harness. I'd be walking along trusses, carrying board. It's amazing that more people don't get hurt,
right?
Frankly, because it was like the wild west when I was building houses. There was no one ever going to come in. There was no OSHA that would show up on a residential site to slap your hand or issue a fine. So it was, as long as you don't fall off and die, you just keep doing what you're doing. And to think about that now, it's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and that's that's part of the challenge is trying to get guys to understand, and again, that's something that I want to try to bring to the guys that work for us is a safe work environment. I mean, we want every one of our employees to go home safely at night. Most of them don't really understand what that means in terms of our envisionment of it, but that's what we want. We want them to do things right. Again, big picture is it's a quality product, and that's one of the elements of the quality.
So in that, like we talk about scheduling, getting people in with your, subcontractor partners in building this, around residential and trying to bring some scheduling, some kind of, if you will, rigidity in a way to the project, and like, this is when it needs to get done, which I get supply chain being its own beast and thing that you can't really control. But in that, like, in seeing more of the mentality, right, coming from big commercial projects, right, where you will be here, you will meet milestones, you will do this, like, and it's enforced to kind of a day in, day out mentality, right? Like, just in residential, or I guess, how is that mindset different? Is really the question, right? From commercial, and that's really the world that I've come from, besides me personally, like putting a roof on, or like doing
Right.
stuff, or, helping guys out with whatever, when I was a teenager, building houses. But like, past that, like, what's the mindset difference that you see with your subs versus, when you were in, especially these big commercial projects?
Well, I mean, one is, on the big commercial, of course, is both the LLC, I mean, there is the rigidity there. I mean, you get to work at, 7 o'clock in the morning, and, in the residential world, typically it's 9:30, then they go to lunch, then they come back, and then they're gone at 3:30. Just, like the commercial guys would leave at 3:30, but they started at 7, had a 30-minute lunch on site, but residential, I mean, it's a night and day difference in how they approach it. It's almost like the whole lifestyle is different from the mentality of the worker, and of course, Texas being open, the union contingent is much smaller on the commercial end. I mean, it's non-existent in residential, but it's much smaller on the commercial end. Typically, it's in the commercial realm of construction, you only see it generally in your MEP trades, and that's not a large portion of it, but that's when you'll see it. If you get into the heavier side, you might see more of the millwrights and ironworker in that, but it's very rare to see that in a general commercial project. Well, the mentality though is still, much more rigid on the commercial side, kind of to that end versus, the residential. And I think the residential, like I said, still kind of, Matt, you said earlier, the Wild Wild West, it's still that. I mean, they've just, the guys, it's run looser. One of the big things that most of the subcontractors here are just labor brokers. On the residential side, if they have a contingent of labor. So, it's just, they're just paying some cash out, and, that's a lot of what they do. Well, there is no relationship between the sub and the employee there, if it's being brokered. So
like, so in that, is it because of like the cyclical nature that Texas typically goes through with like oil, that it's more boom bust than the rest of the country? I mean, I know you're not in like Dallas or Houston, right? Bigger oil towns, but like, I'm guessing here, but like, correct me, like, is that because Texas goes through more big cycles of boom bust?
I wouldn't say specific to the cycles like that on the residential. Now, on the commercial side, you may see more of that because the pay scales of commercial construction versus oil and gas side, when oil and gas starts to uptrend, you can make some very, very good money. So you do have some issues there. On the residential side, typically the only time we really see much of our employee contingent moving over is really more on the CDL type stuff, because they can go drive out in the oil field and make 4 times what they're making driving for, a ready mix company or hauling, gravel. So we do see a lot of the CDL type, drivers disappear. But that's been an issue for some time just because ever since the economy came out of the recession, we've never really fully recovered in those type of trades.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't help that oil tanked in like 14.
Yeah.
So you came out of it, then the oil tanked. You know, that doesn't help for Texas and that economy. But I mean, so we've kind of talked around like housing and the big influx of people in Texas. I mean, still today, like what's the housing market look like? What's kind of what's the future look like?
Well, right now, I mean, the housing market is on fire. The future still, I mean, all the indicators say the future looks good. That we're going to continue to have the people coming in. One of the things for a guy like me versus, a national home builder like a DR Horton or Pulte or, those type of companies, we're somewhat married to the people coming in that are looking for that custom home. So it's getting those touch points. Whereas, the bigger guys, they're building them and they're selling. I mean, they're actually turning people away because they can't build them fast enough. But they're building at a different price point, at a different quality level. Now I do compete with some of the subs, trying to get some of the subs working for me versus them. And it typically isn't the primary sub that works direct for me. It may be a tertiary sub. But what they're doing is the production guys are paying, and they're having to pay more because they can't get the production there. And so they're paying guys, that used to may sub be like a second tier or third tier sub to one of my primary subs. They would come in and they would work, 2 days a week for us, and there would be 3 days on the production side. Well, now all of a sudden there's 6 days on the production side because they're paying them the overtime now to work the production. And so we can't even, we can't compete because one, I can't pay. I shouldn't say I can't pay. It's hard for me to pay an extra, $2 a square foot, to a subcontractor to come in to do something that he's doing the same work, but because production guys are now paying him overtime because they're just cranking them. And they're set up, they're not mobilizing to my site like they have to for me. They're set up in the subdivision. They may do 100 houses in the subdivision. So their incremental cost has gone to basically nothing because they can just stay there and keep working. And they're getting comparable money to what we're paying. So that's been a challenge for us. I think, I still think that unless the economy doesn't completely tank, that we're going to be good here in Texas with regard to the residential side, and the commercials following, suit with it. I mean, we got to have places for these people to, to shop, to go to, to work. And of course, with the work from home, we do have people coming in that, some of the markets that I cover are kind of outside of, in the rural areas that people may go into the city 2 days a week now. So it may be an hour and a half commute, but they're able to work from home the other 3 days and they're out in the country and, they got 3 or 4 acres and then they're not on somebody, 5 feet away. So, it's a different dynamic than what it once was.
For sure. And, I'm looking at your website right now, and you're building a very, very different product from what the Pultes and the Toll Brothers are crapping out. So, I mean, do you, like, these are craftsmanship, they're craft master homes. This Canyon Lake one, first of all, is really cool. But do you find that you can use that to your advantage to attract maybe not higher tier subs, but better craftsman subs, like to, give them the romance of, listen, we're not building tract homes, we're building this or the cedar one with all the stone on it. They don't look like your typical boring subdivision house.
Well, we do, and in as much as we're able to keep the guys busy. Where I run the challenge is because I am smaller. If I don't have the production, I'll lose those subs, and because they've got 5 other houses that they can go build. And there's some production guys that are building not exactly like me, but that are smaller production, but doing a higher end. Kind of, they would compete, I'd say, more like with a Toll Brothers type product, where it's a semi-custom, I guess, for lack of a better term, to the
Okay.
to these, where they let the people come in, make some selections, but it's still a production floor plan. So those guys end up being more my competitors than, say the Pulte's or those type of guys, because they're building. Unfortunately, a lot of the subdivisions in this area have allowed them to come in now, and so they're now building in those subdivisions, and it's creating additional competition for guys like me, where these were originally strictly custom. Now the semi-custom guys are 2/3 of the subdivision.
So you're a general contractor, obviously. How many employees do you have?
Now it's just me.
Okay. So you're a strictly paper GC and sub out everything?
Sub out everything.
Okay.
We when the pandemic hit, we were at the point where we were fixing to start making some hires to kind of grow the business, and it, like everybody, we didn't know what it was going to look like. So I elected to just run the work that we had at the time. And, you can't be in the field, in the office both. And as things started to open up, which, we were lucky in Texas. Texas was pretty open the whole time in terms of allowing us to do things. But I wasn't back in the office quick enough to start building, the relationships to move forward, because when the pandemic hit, all of my leads and have never come back. Those leads never did. So then it's like I'm kind of retooling the business yet again to rebuild it up, so that we would be able to move forward again. So I'm just about to that point to start bringing the people back on, and allow us to start that growth pattern again.
So I'm going to kind of change directions a little bit, but a question I don't usually ask, but if you're doing everything, and I've been there, and this is why I want to hear your answer, but you're judge, jury, executioner. You're doing everything from sales, estimating, project management, supervision, billing, accounting, all of it, soup to nuts. How the hell do you balance that with a family? Because I've seen your Facebook, you've got 2 adorable little girls, you're married. What do you do to make sure that you don't lose touch of that?
Well, first, thank you for that. But one of the best things that has happened for me in being in business for myself is my office is literally 5 minutes from my house.
Nice.
So I can come down to my office to get out of the house, so I can focus on the work. But then I can also run home if I need to, work on homework, or, run one of the girls to a function, or be home with one of them while my wife takes them out. So it's been very good for me. And that, when we talked earlier about, some of the relationship of the commercial to residential and making that transition, that was one of the deciding factors. I was on the road, about 2.5 days a week. And there were days where I may be in town at night. Like I would come home, go to bed, and I would be 4 a.m. and catch a flight to Missouri, for instance. Be in Missouri, fly out at 7, 8 o'clock at night, get home at midnight again, go to bed, get up, and I'd go to work and be in the office the next day, get home at 6 or 7 at night, and kiss my kids to go to bed, kind of thing. It was just like it got to the point to where that balance wasn't there for me. And not that this is perfect by any means, but to your point, it being so close has been very helpful in allowing me to do the things that I need to do. And I try and get up well ahead of the family in the mornings, try and run a morning routine to where I'm able to start getting things done well before they're ever up. I do get to see both my kids in the morning. I typically take them to school in the mornings, which has been nice. I mean, really since I've gone on my own, I've seen my children more than I did before, when I was doing the other. So it's been convenient. Now, that's not to say there's not sacrifices that get made, but
Of course.
it's, it being so close, I think it's probably one of the biggest elements to allow me to have that balance in life right now.
No, that's great. And I get it. I did kind of the same thing. I traveled a lot for about a decade in a former career, and I was, 5 to 6 nights away, and it just got insane. And then I came back and I had a job with a large GC locally, and I was working 80-hour weeks. So same difference. And, I jumped ship, and honestly, the whole COVID nonsense, you can't see it because of my background, but it caused me to build an office right next to my house. So I have a full office over here that I can step outside of the house. So, dad's not home. You can't come knock on the door, but I can shut the door here and focus, but I can bounce back and forth. And I'm not here full time. I'm here a couple days a week, especially when we're recording, but it's great to have that balance back. So I get exactly what you're saying.
Shane, where can everybody find you, and what cities, just so that we spell it out for everybody, are you building in?
So I guess the easiest and probably the most prevalent place I'm found is going to be on Facebook. Our company is Craftmaster Homes LC, so it's at Craftmaster Homes LC. Website is craftmastercustomhomes.com. And we also are pretty active on LinkedIn with Craftmaster Homes as well. I actually, in the commercial world, I used to use it really more from a recruiting perspective, and so I had a huge contingent of people. So when I started, the residential side, I thought, well, I already got the following there. Not that I was really posting anything to get any following, but I had the connection to people. And so I've utilized that. It to me, it doesn't have as much traction as Facebook does because of what we post out on it, but it's still out there. And then in terms of the areas that we work in, primarily we work between Austin and San Antonio, the I-35 corridor, out probably 50 miles each direction, east and north and south, east and west, kind of however you're looking at it at that particular city. That's what you when you're running. But we try to say New Braunfels is where I'm based at, and that's in between, almost right in between Austin and San Antonio. Schlitterbahn is based here, which y'all may have heard of. We've got a couple of them around the country now. There's one in Kansas City, Midwest area, so that's why I thought it might have. But anyhow, so we're based here in New Braunfels, and we can go wherever. I mean, I was recently bidding some work in Austin and San Antonio on the multifamily side. I've looking at a medical facility coming up in Kerrville, which is probably about 45 minutes outside of San Antonio, kind of northwest of San Antonio, about an hour and 15 minutes from here. So it's kind of project based as to the range, but our sweet spot, I would say, is probably about 50 miles out in encompassing this New Braunfels area.
Awesome. And then as we're running up on a little bit on time, is kind of one, really, what is the biggest problem that you see within the industry, and kind of, if you want to also wrap your kind of closing thoughts in that too, but problem solution that you see throughout construction, and any final thoughts?
Well, I'll kind of hit back to the supply chain labor, which we kind of bounced around a little bit on both of those. I think those are going to be ongoing issues for our industry. Unfortunately, we hadn't brought sexy back to, being in the field of construction in the blue collar world. So, I used to always joke with our superintendents about that. The younger generations are not endeavoring into it. And a lot of that's on us because we're pushing kids to go to college, not to take a trade. I think we might start to see a little bit of that kind of come back around, but the tradespeople are getting so old, bringing the craftsman side to it is not going to be there. Similarly, we've outsourced all of our manufacturing overseas. So even that blue collar element of work, until we get that back over here, I think it's going to be an ongoing issue from a supply, perspective. Solutions to that, yes, we can try and engage more young people to get into it, but I think it's going to be, what can we do from a building perspective to be more efficient? Whether it be alternative construction methods, that maybe the 3D printing, the SIP construction becoming more prevalent, doing things that we might be able to integrate more into the field, or even, again, the planning and scheduling. I mean, it's not going to be this, I want a building, let's go build it tomorrow. It be, we have to start planning these things more in advance, integrating, the design systems into the construction more, I think will help. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do to make us better. But I think they're going to be a challenge. I don't know that, how effective robotics are going to be into it. I know they're trying to use more of it. It's kind of like the 3D printing side. But I don't think it's gonna replace the craftsman at the end of the day. So I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge, and I think it's just really planning better. I think is hopefully what's going to make us successful in the future.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that answer, Shane. I mean, it's a mix of becoming really, really efficient and really good at what we do, but also boosting that attraction to infill the ranks, below us. And, there's got to be a healthy balance we can find to do both of those, but it's going to take a full scale effort on both of those fronts to keep the ship moving.
Right.
Well, Shane, thank you for coming on. Matt, any other final thoughts that you've got for today's show?
Shane, I appreciate the time, man. It's a really cool story you have, and I wish you the best in your future endeavors.
I appreciate it. Thank y'all both.
All right, guys. Today we've covered a wide range of topics, from big, massive projects to Texas music. Most importantly on the show, to really the things that we've been talking about here for a while. At the end of the day, we need to bring people back to the trades. We've got to plan, communicate better at the end of the day, and it's not just bringing more people into the trades, but understanding and really communicating that construction has a lot of value. There's a lot of skill that goes into what we do, into the craftsmanship of building. It's not just slapping some tile together, slapping a floor down for these homeowners, that want it tomorrow, right? They want a nice home. They want a great place to live. You want a good office building. You want something that's not a hole in the wall, or you're worried about falling through floors. Like at the end of the day, what we do is provide a great product and something that is to be proud of. Like Shane talked about, coming from big construction where he didn't feel that it was. I mean, at the end of the day, those are some pretty big buildings to be proud of, but to be hands-on, and a lot of us on a day-to-day basis, we are in the trenches, seeing these buildings come out of the ground, seeing projects go from concept to completion. It's a big deal. So being proud of what we do in construction, being proud of the trades, being proud of the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis, and being able to communicate effectively from, day laborer to owner, right? And communicating up and down the chain, and just the people that are in our communities of what we do it's a huge service, not only to the industry, but our communities as a whole, guys. So I really hope that you took some really good nuggets out of today's episode. And again, you continue to spread the message of the trades, construction, engineering, GCs, architecture. It's a good career. It's a great place to be. There's a lot of latitude, a lot of opportunity that you have within this industry, from barely touched on it, but oil and gas to residential to, big commercial projects. There's a lot of space for all of us to be. So again, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and go ahead and share the show out. And that is this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.